Okay.
Hello there, Piers. How you doing?
How'd you do?
Good,
To
thank
see you.
you. Yes, you too. I'll just tell the audience that I came across a YouTube that you just in the street, in the high street or wherever, and holding a small ladder, going upstairs on the small ladder in the middle of the street, very old school style, and I really appreciated it.
Oh, this was on Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, that is. And I was like, I mean, never mind the genius of this guy to go up the ladder in the middle of the street and to do it the right way. I think that what grabbed me really is what you said. And this was everything you said was spot on. And I was like, I really have to interview this guy. And I've been trying to get hold of you for, I don't know, a couple of weeks or so. And then
Yeah,
it just
sorry.
happened. It just, yes, it just happened the other day. You answered the phone and here we are. So please tell the audience, well, something about yourself. Who are you?
Okay, I'm Piers Corbin. I'm a long-range weather forecaster. I started as a child. I was always interested in the weather. I've been living science and got a first-class degree to Imperial College, London, and did physics and theoretical physics and solid-state physics. And then later I did a MSc in astrophysics in Queen Mary College, which is also part of the University of London. And Imperial College is now an independent university, in fact.
Right.
I still go there at times doing various things. I developed the ideas of long-range forecasting from the astrophysics, where I was studying solar activity and
Right.
went into how it affects the Earth's weather, although the study I did was actually on galaxy formation. So later on, and I developed certain ideas of predicting activity on the sun and how it may affect the weather, and did a lot of work and eventually came up with this method we have, which is based on understanding periodicities and partial periodicities in the sun and their modulation by the moon and stratospheric winds and so forth on the Earth.
So were your predictions right? I mean, is your model stable?
Yes,
Right.
yes.
That's a good answer.
We've improved the predictions. I started doing this in 1983 or so and gave up. It was too difficult. But in 1984, your viewers may have heard of the great miners' strike in Britain. And some friends of mine who were involved in various, political activities supporting the miners' strike, they wanted me to go back and do these forecasts to find out if it was going to be a cold winter in 1984-85. And I said to them, look, I don't know. I haven't a clue. I've given up. And they insisted I should go back and do it, which I did. And, I came up, it was going to be a really cold winter in 84-85. So I told them that, that was my actual, assessment. It wasn't, just made up to keep them happy. And that is what happened.
Yeah.
So after that, I thought, well, we better stick at this because I've hit something which is working. And by about 1990, we had something which was sellable. But I couldn't sell it straight away. So I organised weather bets. I bet on weather forecasts with Ian Hill. And this got a lot of publicity.
For sure.
And paid the rent. And then we got some business, from a clothing retail company, Etam Clothing.
Right.
They bought for us and planned for the summer of 1990, which worked out extremely well for them.
Tell me, you're a big boy now. How old are you?
Well, I'm 72.
All right.
Pretending not to be. I could be.
No, I wouldn't give you, I won't give you 72. And especially when you're up the ladder in the middle of the street, no way. 72 is not the right number here. So just to summarize for the audience, your website is weatheraction.com. And
Correct.
And soon I would like also to tell us what is it that you do there and how you help. I understand, as far as I understand, mostly farmers. I mean, they.
Yes, that's right.
All right.
Before
Hang on. I just to say, so you came up with the long range weather, and you're a climate forecaster, you're a physicist, you're astrophysicist, and you're also a meteorologist, right?
That's right.
Right.
I'm a theoretical physicist because I did the theoretical physics option in Imperial College final year, which is, well, for mathematicians around, there's actually more maths in Imperial College physics than there is in most mathematics courses.
So I just, before we dive into the actual reason or reasons, I really wanted to speak with you and to introduce you to whoever I can. Just tell us a bit about your website, weatheraction.com, how you help people with...
Okay. Weatheraction.com is our website, and my Twitter account is @Piers_Corbyn. And on the website, we have some little bits of news, and you can go on there to buy forecasts. And on the Twitter account, we have latest news, and I retweet quite a lot of things with comments about the weather, but also other things happening in Britain and so on. But largely, it's about the weather.
So would you say your forecasts are accurate?
Yes. They've improved in detail and accuracy since we started. Like in the summer of 1990, we warned of a lousy start to the summer and a very hot end, like a lousy June and July and a hot August. And that's what happened, with record or near record temperatures. But the detail wasn't very much, like we'd talk about early in the month this, late in the month that. And the method then was quite simple. We didn't understand much about or anything about how the moon's orbit modulates the rush of particles coming from the sun, i.e. the solar wind. But we do understand that now. So we developed a lot of things, mainly when we floated on the stock exchange in 1989 or about that, yes. 1998, I mean. And got some funding, investment, improved the method, reached more understanding, produced lots of graphs. And in this office, there's, whole shelves full of various graphs that we've developed, and correlation, two-dimensional charts as well. So we improved the technique, and we now call it the solar lunar action technique, whereas initially it was a solar weather technique, but we brought the moon in as well.
And I understand many farmers are using your forecasts to develop the crop.
Exactly. They use the forecast for planning crops, like, for example, cauliflowers, where if you plant cauliflowers and you have a very cold winter, then they die. So some of the farmers involved in that would know if we had a cold winter forecast, they would plant instead of cauliflowers, they'd plant cabbages.
Cabbages, yes. I wanted to say.
A field of live cabbages is worth more than a field of dead cauliflowers.
Sure. All right.
And then it goes on about timing of planting in spring. It's important then to know when there's going to be rain, because if you put rain on for some fertilizer, washing that in might be all right. If it's insecticide, it might be bad, and then because it'll wash through and it'll be used. So you have to work out what to do, but they can save a lot of money if they do their timing right, and also time the harvest collection better, because they can only use combine harvesters when they hire them. You see, the timing is important, and they do phone up sometimes and say, "Look, is that time window for potential hay harvest or wheat harvest going to be long enough or short enough?" So they say, "All right, we'll go early or we'll go late." Whatever.
Sure. Excellent.
So other people, the companies as well, and energy, commodity brokers, energy, well, gamblers, if you like, by the forecast as well.
Yeah. You know, being an Israeli, and also I've lived in the UK for 6 years or so, the not once I was called abrupt. And if I stick to this to this word,
Okay.
and being an Israeli and being who I am and being, let's say, abrupt in my way, in my manner.
Okay, well, you don't seem abrupt right now. So.
No, hang on. This was just a preparation for the first real question. Global warming or climate change, is it a hoax?
Yes,
is it real?
It's not real at all. No, it's a complete hoax, if you will like, as a form of describing it. No, man-made climate change does not exist. Carbon dioxide levels are driven by climate. They do not drive climate.
Yes.
And the story of controlling climate through modifying CO2 or something is a nonsense. The climate change story is not to control climate, it's to control you.
Yes.
It's to control the population. It gives them something to hate or love or whatever, and then they're going to follow some agenda involving spending money to certain stupid projects.
So can you just elaborate on what is CO2 and how or why it's so important, obviously, to our oxygen, you know?
Yes.
And also how this agenda works in such a way that they manage to convince so many countries, governments, organizations about this, let's say, green agenda, which I have nothing against green. I love plants and everything, but you know what I mean.
Well,
It's just an agenda. It's just a man-made agenda. So if you can elaborate on that, that will be awesome.
Okay, right. Well, the actual data shows that there's only 0.04% of the atmosphere is carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide is the gas of life. And historically, in geological time, it has been 20 times this and so forth. And there's not a correlation over geological time of hundreds of millions of years between carbon dioxide levels and temperature. So they go up and down all over the place. If you look in the last 100,000 years or million years rather, you see that at the end of an ice age, what happens? The sea temperature goes up, and then after that, the carbon dioxide levels go up.
Right.
And then temperature reaches a peak, and then the carbon dioxide reaches a peak, and then they, fall down one after the other. So there's no evidence that carbon dioxide is the driver. Now, the reason for this, of course, is that there's 50 times more carbon dioxide dissolved in the sea than there is in the air. So when you warm up the sea, all gases will come off, like there's a bottle of water here. And if you warm that, then whatever's dissolved in there will come out.
Yes.
And that's happens.
Basically, it's released to the air. Right?
Released to the air, yeah.
Yes.
And if you add in carbon dioxide and make too much, it'll go into the sea. Or put another way, if you put 51 tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, 50 of them will go straight into the sea, and 1 will stay in the atmosphere.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
for man to change the composition of the atmosphere is very difficult.
Yes.
Very difficult indeed. But the reason for the long, complicated lag, which is of hundreds of years between carbon dioxide and temperatures, is that with carbon dioxide rising after the temperatures, is the complicated circulation patterns, where basically the surface of the ocean can absorb or emit carbon dioxide, but the deep ocean is colder and is capable of absorbing more. So when you can get a warm period, you get more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, but then it can get subducted, like around Greenland, for example, and go deep into the ocean. But it won't come out again for 500, 600, 700 or 800 years even, or after it's gone under the Atlantic and gone round and come out again on the Pacific. So what we're seeing now is probably a after effect of the medieval warm period.
Wow.
So man can't do anything about this. Man's CO2 will go in there, and if you put CO2 in near the sea, it'll go straight in the sea, basically.
So,
But
and does it support?
the whole atmosphere, including the highest up CO2 that's up there, will stay around. But on average, it'll disappear within a few years. But the mechanism to bring it back is more complicated, involving the sea, where you have this 800-year lag or so.
The CO2 that goes into the sea, does it support like plant life in the sea?
Yes, it does.
Like it does.
Although mostly there's no plant life very deep down, but
Sure.
in the oceans there is plant life all the time, which requires CO2. Yes.
The same level as plants outside of the sea, or less or more?
The same mechanism, yeah. Photosynthesis happens in the sea, yeah. Yeah.
All right. So, and what about man-made CO2? I mean, obviously, all the industrial age, the last 200 years, we created and we're still creating a lot of CO2. What about that?
Yeah. Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have much effect. Well, it doesn't have any effect because, as I said, the CO2 is controlled by the sea. The sea rules. Now, the man's contribution to the flow of carbon dioxide in and out of the sea, basically, or the sea and the land. Every year there's millions of tons come out of the biosphere, or the sea and the land, and they also go into the sea and the land. And there's a dynamic equilibrium. And the decay time for, on average, a lump of CO2 you put spread out of the whole atmosphere would be about 3 years. And this is deduced from nuclear testing, how long it took radioactivity in the atmosphere to disappear. It disappeared after about 16, 20 years, but, so the half-life was sort of 3 years, something like that anyway. Not very long, really. Okay.
Yes,
so man's carbon dioxide, though, is only 4% of the total carbon dioxide flux. So suppose man's CO2 goes in the atmosphere, and somehow the whole of the CO2 in the atmosphere is going to follow it. It's got to follow it if it's running temperatures and man controlling it. Well, that requires nature to follow man which is a conspiracy, right?
Yes.
But you see, there's about there's lots and lots of termites in the earth, and they produce maybe twice as much CO2 as man, maybe 10 times as much,
Wow.
whatever.
Really, the termites?
The termites, yes.
Really?
So,
wow.
they're more important than man in producing
For the soil, yes.
food. Yeah. So, if you want to limit CO2, we should have a war on termites. That's what we should be doing. I don't know if Donald Trump will, entertain such an idea, but if CO2's that bad, something has to be done about it. I mean, better to have a war on termites than a war on people having holidays. You see?
Absolutely.
So, that's what I say to these people, because you see, there's no evidence whatsoever that carbon dioxide drives temperatures, and we've challenged scientists in public meetings to come forward with evidence, and they systematically avoid debate.
Wow.
I mean, I've been invited on the BBC and then cancelled at the last minute because some government advisor has got upset with them and said, no, we don't want that.
No, I'm not surprised. I mean, it's some sort of a method they use, which they shout stuff, but then they don't come to a debate. I mean, it happens also in Israel.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
So Extinction Rebellion have refused to debate with us. But, to be fair, they're not people that know anything, actually, most of the activists of Extinction Rebellion. Yeah. They have a script which comes to them, and they are funded by, George Soros, ExxonMobil, and the 5G operators. Now, why that happens, we can go into. But
in a minute, we will, no worries. We'll get into that.
They're not radical scientists that have suddenly gone mad. They're young people who've been told they can save the planet somehow. Yeah. They haven't got a way of how to do it. Because there isn't a way of how to do it. But they're really political agenda.
Yeah, they have like a name, sort of a slang name, useful idiots, because
Indeed,
yes, they are
indeed.
being used for the agenda
They are.
without their knowledge. So
That's right.
yes,
That's
all
right.
right. How many scientists, or in your field, are there that support what you say?
Well, it's probably quite a lot, but they tend to not to put their heads above the parapet. You see, I've met people who say, well, Piers, look, you're probably right, but I've got mouths to feed.
Yes.
And I've had completely ridiculous conversations in meetings because there's grants there to do research about man-made climate change. And this so-called percentage, that 97% of scientists believe in man-made climate change, is not true. There was a paper published on that, which listed a whole lot of papers and said, but when you examine the papers, what they actually said was they'd put climate change in the headline, and they'd got a grant to do research into carbon dioxide effects, etc. But most of them didn't draw any conclusion at all. Top 3% of them said, yeah, there's some CO2 effect, and about 0.3% said there's, or maybe 0.03, I can't remember, but a very small percentage said that they believed that man was the main influence. But you see, they don't, that's from their limited work. So the claim of 97% is nonsense. It's the other way round, if anything. And more recently than that paper, there's been the Oregon petition, or whatever it's called, signed by about 30,000 scientists now, who are scientists and engineers with degrees, and they've put the opinion in that, and on there, as far as they can understand, they see no evidence for climate being controlled by CO2 or man, or both.
Right. What about weather modification, or climate engineering, by man, by NASA, by whoever? I mean, is it real? And if so,
well,
what you know about it?
Yeah, there are real ways of influencing the weather. You can make it rain. So long as you've got a cloud, you can seed the cloud by putting silver iodide in it, or solid carbon dioxide to make cloud nucleation. And that was done in the 50s in Britain, and I think in 1953, and it led to what was known as the Lynmouth disaster, where massive floods and people drowned. Now, the authorities then denied it, and then they admitted they had done a few tests the day before and they didn't believe they'd caused anything. Well, I don't think anyone believes that story, but you see they did. In China, they do as a regular basis, trying to make it rain early or late when they see a cloud. But there are limits to this. Now, there's other ideas of microwaving the ionosphere and reflecting it back and so forth, which may or may not be working. But certainly it is, military are very interested in controlling the weather.
I just add a quick...
create storms if they can, yes.
Yeah, exactly. I want you to continue. I just add a quick sentence, because about a month ago I interviewed Barry Trower, if you know him. He's from the UK, from I think he's from Dartford. Anyway, he's from Devon.
Okay. Yeah.
And he's ex-Royal Navy, all right?
Okay.
And he knows quite a lot about microwave weapons, etc.
Yeah.
And I interviewed him about this and about 5G, and I can send you a link for the interview. I mean, anyway.
Oh, do that.
We
just had a big meeting in Glastonbury about 5G, which we could talk on later. But
the festival and 5G, yes, I know. I read about it. But he said that there are 16 HAARP facilities around the world. So you just mentioned the army and weather, maybe using the ionosphere and microwave. And I was surprised. I thought maybe there's 2, 3, 4, 5, but he verified, and he's quite an expert in his field, like you are in yours, and he verified there's 16 HAARP facilities, and I'm thinking there's maybe more even, if he knows about 16. For sure there are more, and I'm thinking...
Well, I'm sure there are more, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and I mean these...
Well, it's very worrying.
Exactly. This is why I'm asking you about weather modification.
So what are they up to? Well, you see, we know that they're there and they're trying things, but we don't have evidence that they've been successful.
Yeah.
You see, maybe the power involved isn't enough. Because you see, we have what we call red spikes, red weather periods, where we can predict a long time ahead that there's going to be solar eruptions in the sun and when they're going to be Earth facing. And when that happens, that will exacerbate storms. It makes storms more intense.
Yeah.
And our success rate on this is very, very high. Now, yes. So this, like you know, well, basically, if we say there's going to be a red period, then the number of extreme events and the precipitation of rain or the intensity of snow will go up. And I could say that we're 99% certain of that. You know, statistically, it works extremely well. Now, if then other people say, oh, yeah, this was caused by NOAA or NASA turning on the HAARP thing. Well, yeah, okay, but I don't believe that they're following our forecasts and like turning on the switch when we say there's going to be a spike. Now, it'd be nice if they were, perhaps, but I don't think it is. So, you know, the sun is ruling. So currently they're only able to make some sort of perturbations. Now, people have said, can they induce earthquakes with this? Now, maybe, maybe not. But certainly we have some other general views that earthquakes will increase again. That is big earthquakes, not little ones that are follow-ons, but new big ones which have follow-ons. The risk of those does go up in our R5 and R4 periods, as we call them. R5 is the highest, most active. R4 is next, and so on. Well, I think what's going on needs to be investigated and controlled by governments properly, and it should be stopped. But the military have got a rule unto themselves, and whether they're going to succeed in either making earthquakes or making storms, I don't know. I think it's difficult. You see, to make a big storm, you know, there's a whole lot of things about the organisation of the storm and it working. Now, you know, that is a kind of process of the atmosphere self-organising with input from solar activity, and I don't think it's easy to like trigger a storm unless you've already got a storm about to be triggered. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, sure.
If in the future this could happen, but you know, there are Dr. Strangelove scientists around who will do anything. You know, anything, man.
You mentioned George Soros before, and he said, I don't know, some years back, he said that maybe it's not a correct quote, but still, generally, he said that if he can make the weather a commodity, then he will. Because if it's something, if it's something he can make money from, he should. And, and I don't, you know, stuff that this guy says, I don't take it so lightly. Maybe it's true. I don't know if it is or not, but I'm saying it's good to leave all options open. And the next question is, what about chemtrails? For your opinion, are they real? And if they are real, do they have an influence about the weather and solar? I mean, there's all sorts of influences.
Well, again, it's the same type of issue. I don't have information that normal air flights are dropping anything into the atmosphere, or except though a lot of jet fuel has changed recently, I understand. So whether there's something in all jet fuels, I don't know. But it seems there are military activities going on. There are conferences on geoengineering where they do discuss putting things in the atmosphere to shield off solar radiation. Is one thing it can do. The other thing is, of course, cloud seeding can happen as well by things put in the atmosphere. Now, I don't know enough about it, but I think it is real and dangerous. And, you know, the people who investigated it, I think we should listen to them. I mean, but there is a slight problem in that a lot of people looking at the sky, when they start believing this, they see a vapor trail and they say it's a chemtrail. Well, it may be a chemtrail, it may be a vapor trail, but, you know, aeroplanes naturally make these things under the right circumstances of relative humidity. Has to be high up.
You know, last time I was in the UK in 2009, all right, 10 years ago. And it was springtime, and I was in Alton, near the 831 in Hampshire, just the north of Hampshire, on the border of Surrey. And I looked up, and there were just crisscross of lines, you know, within half an hour, 1 hour, 1.5 hours, just before that the sky were blue, and within 1.5 hours it was all whitish gray sky. And it seems like no one noticing that. I mean, obviously today maybe there's more awareness to the subject of chemtrails, but even back then I knew already about chemtrails. We're talking 10 years ago, and I looked up and I was like, wow, because when I lived in the UK, which was years before, I didn't know about chemtrails, and obviously I didn't look up, I didn't look for them. But once you know about them, you start to see them, and you see them constantly. It's day in, day out. There's no stop almost. And even in Israel, obviously we have them. I saw them also in India. And I'm thinking, you know, geoengineering and saying that there is a climate change or global warming, I mean, it doesn't matter now what's the name, given it's an agenda, and now saying that maybe, I mean, not us, but the governments or the military, etc., or NASA, they're saying that in order to combat climate change or global warming, we should spray. And I'm thinking, the way they work, these guys, is first they do, then they tell us what they do to give themselves approval for doing what they have done already in the past 50 years or 30 years or 20 years, you know. So maybe it's just a theory, but for me, it's very solid because I can see it with my eyes. I cannot prove, I cannot prove what's in the spraying, you know, what substances are there, but I can see the sprays with my eyes. And it's good to know that you also think it's real, although it's not.
No, I do think it's real. But we need a way of making it come out, because see, when the military are doing many things secretly, many things. This is one of them, and you know, we need to have an accountable military when they're starting doing things which like this. But you see, when these things are raised in Parliament or you know, American or anywhere, or Britain, they get sidelined. I mean, there was a committee in the House of the Parliament looking into these things, but you know, I don't think it is given any substantial report. You know, because they probably get blocked and they're told these things are secrets. Well, you know, this has to stop.
How is it connected? I mean, how the global warming agenda or climate change agenda, how is it connected to what we experiencing now and very much in the UK? And I'm talking about 5G. It's going all over the world, or well, in most countries, not all over the world, but in many Western countries or developed countries. And I've interviewed, I mean, Barry Trower was just one of my interviews. I interviewed also Mark Steele, and as well as others from various countries, US, UK, Canada. And it's really big, and it's really happening now in the UK. How do you see the 5G combined with the climate agenda?
Well, the way it's happening is that the big picture is that the West is facing a big banking and economic crisis. They're very desperate.
Why?
And
I would like, Piers, why you say that? I mean,
what?
Why the West?
Well, the banking crises happen in cycles, and the experts involved watch these things. So there's another very big one due, like as bad as 2008. Right. So that's an issue which all governments are worried about.
Right.
Like Deutsche Bank is legally, well, not I should say it should be illegal and closed down right now. It's got massive debt way beyond what it's allowed to have, and of course that is the linchpin of the European Union financial structure. So that's a kind of background thing. Now, there's another thing about general control of resources around the world and how this can happen. And the climate change story, its origins are in the United Nations. One of their leaders at the time in the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, said that Edenhofer, his name is, and he's available in our presentations. He said the idea that the climate change story is just about the environment isn't true. It's a political agenda and enables us to control. And it is sold to people in the phrase of redistribution of wealth, i.e. you're going to tax America because America has caused all this CO2, which is causing global warming or crises or whatever. But then you look at the way this agenda works. Where does the money go? It's not redistribution downwards, it's redistribution upwards. And the projects they're talking about are things like, there's a plan to dam the Amazon. All over the Amazon basin, you're going to build hydroelectric schemes. This is going to destroy the indigenous tribes, destroy the existing environment and growth. And for what? Well, to make electricity or something. Okay. But you see, we call this a fake green policy. But see, any time there's a big project, and all the UN projects or government projects are big projects, then the banks get hold of the money, big money. And obviously they divert it as they need to. And at the same time as the big Extinction Rebellion protests, the World Economic Forum, that's the group that meet in Davos, the thieves of Davos, as I call them, with George Soros. They produced a green report which said, we need to spend, I don't know if it's £1 billion a week, a month, a year or whatever, but sorry, £1 trillion. I think it's £1 trillion a year to save the planet. Yeah. To save the planet in response to all these demonstrators. Well, yes, okay. And the European Union has now got an application in it to spend £1 billion on improving batteries, having more batteries. Now, there's a theoretical limit on the effectiveness of batteries because they're thermodynamical systems involving electricity, but they are. So, this is basically a waste of money. But I suspect what will happen is they'll get that £1 billion and it will be used to help save the banks. And, of course, the trillion we're talking about for World Economic Forum will be used in the same way. Yeah.
So... again, I go back to the question, how it's all connected to 5G.
Oh, 5G. Right. Okay. In order to save the planet, you need to have smart meters in every home where, your lights will be turned off and on automatically, your fridge will be turned off and on, so you'll save money, they tell us, right? Now, this 5G is used to communicate between all these objects as part of the Internet of Things. Right. It needs to be 5G because that's a high frequency, massive amount of information. So it's sold to the public in the terms of like smart meters are good for you and you'll be able to download a full length film in 10 seconds or even 1 second. I don't know. Look, I frankly can't watch a film that fast, so I don't care a damn. But, for people who collect this sort of stuff, then, wow. However, there are dangers because it is very high frequency, it is concentrated, and there's a lot of independent work done which shows it is damaging to health, might be causing infertility, killing insects, and we have seen a big reduction in insects, and making animals ill when they're near it. And there's a film we showed at Glastonbury recently, which people can find if they go to weatheraction.com. We have a link leading to it at the King Arthur pub, Glastonbury, where we had our meeting last Saturday, where this man, John Kitson, spoke and showed pictures of how blood samples, or the samples taken of blood of people exposed, were changed. The red blood corpuscles had been modified, and he showed some of them were forming strings. And he said, well, these are the people who get severe headaches when they're exposed to this type of radiation, because there are a certain proportion of the population are very sensitive to this microwave radiation. So I think it's extremely worrying. It's a military thing anyway. used by the military suddenly being whacked into the general public. It has not been tested. It's certainly not been independently tested. In fact, I haven't seen any. The only tests I've seen are showing damage, and the reason for Extinction Rebellion and what's behind it is that the green agenda is used to justify this stuff, which makes large amounts of money. And Citizens Online, which is where Gail Bradbrook comes from, who's the sort of founder spokeswoman for Extinction Rebellion, Citizens Online has got on its committee ExxonMobil, former ExxonMobil chief executives, and all the internet operators, the 5G operators and providers. So, these people aren't, frankly, what's ExxonMobil doing there? Well, they're there because the green agenda puts energy prices up, which means, there's obviously hiccups in energy prices as
Sure.
And so forth. But the general trend is energy prices will go up. And the consequence of this is that basically the oil companies have doubled their profits on 98% of world energy production, while 2% has been handed over to biofuels or wind farms or whatever. People have to know the actual world percentage of alternative energy is very small.
And why were you in Glastonbury?
Well, we had this meeting there called The Bigger Picture, where Mark Windows gave a little speech about how it hangs together, and so did Sandy Adams, and they talked a lot about this Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030, which is the United Nations plan to basically manage the world.
Yeah.
Now, it's not a conspiracy or anything. You can buy books of that thing.
Yeah, I know. It's a reality. Yes.
It's a reality.
Yes.
And every borough, every council in London has got a Agenda 21 plan. It's called ICLEA, then, the
I know.
International Committee on Environment and whatever. But that's what it does. They have a plan which is to make properties, housing smaller, bring more people
to the cities.
Increase rents. And all of it is always sold on the back of the green agenda. Like this is to save the planet. Well, and of course the 5G is introduced in all new buildings now. So it's all part of the whole thing. And the 5G is control, as well as, now a thing that just really occurs to me. Suppose there's a big, upset, big commotion. People are getting revolutionary and rioting and so on. Then what happens if these 5G transmitters are suddenly increased in intensity? Because you see, if you cross these, because they need line of sight to do, and line of sight means that a lot of trees have to be chopped down, and that's happened in England already. So one thing we did in Glastonbury, we had a big hug a tree demonstration where we launched a little campaign called Save the Trees, Stop 5Gs. And that is catching Glastonbury as well as a lot of other places as we speak. But, the point about these rays, if you like, or bands, quite narrow bands, are they would be dangerous for people who are sensitive, and probably dangerous for everybody.
Already the UK government has been using them against protesters, against Irish protesters. Israel, I think, has been using them. The US, Russia, so many governments been using these frequencies.
And Israel leads the world on innovative arms, and as far as I understand it, Israel and Sweden. Sweden, progressive Sweden. Well, okay, they're making money on arms while talking equal ops, political correctness. Well, okay, I just don't like the idea of being politically correct on one hand and, bombing and destroying humans on others.
Yes.
But I think it's important to get to the roots of the UN agenda, right? It is not to save the planet. It's not. That is a cover for, enhancing control, and it's backed up by the oil companies, by the arms manufacturers, and so forth. and it is really, really bad.
I understand, maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I read, that in Glastonbury they introduced 5G antennas in the
There
festival.
are 5G antennas there now. There was a demonstration. We had a demonstration against the inauguration of the mayor of Glastonbury when that was on Sunday,
Right.
where some councillors were saying, "Oh, we're doing our best," and you know, so we chanted at them fake green because they were pretending to be green. Well, you know, they probably, some of them are really upset when they heard it means that trees are going to be chopped down, so they're wondering what to do. But Green Party policy in Britain is they support 5G, and it's more important to chop down trees to save the planet than it is to save trees to save the planet.
Yes.
So I ask you, where is this?
Yes.
Where did the Green Party come from anyway? I mean, where did it come from? Because it used to be
Who is funding them? I mean, it's going back to George Soros and the Ford Foundation. Yes.
The Ecology Party was the forerunner of this, which was, you know, I don't know, harmless, I would say. But then somehow they morphed into this green thing, and a lot of people on the left suddenly said they were red and green combined.
Exactly.
They stopped supporting mining of coal and imposed mining of coal, and then stopped opposing nuclear power, and now they support nuclear power. So, you know, I've seen my friends sort of flip in the last 30, 40 years or so.
What about Greenpeace?
Well, the same type of thing. The founder of Greenpeace, and is one of them, and his picture was on the wall, it seems to have gone. His name will come to me in a second. But he like David Bellamy, a well-known environmentalist on BBC television, they were, you know, part of the Greenpeace movement at the start, but they say it got taken over by people who became obsessed with the CO2 story instead of just, you know, what plant is this, what plant is that, is it in danger, and so forth. You know, they've put the CO2 story to rule what Greenpeace does instead. So Greenpeace is part of the organ of green propaganda to enable this propagation of a new world order. And I think it's worth looking at what happened to David Bellamy. I mean, I met him, I know him, great guy. He did, you know, really nice naturalist programs, and he looked into the CO2 story, and he just said on TV, look, it's nonsense. It doesn't work. It's not true. There's not enough CO2. You know, he knew less than we know now about how it's complete nonsense. But even then, he knew it was nonsense. Well, he lost his job straight away. And he lost all his positions on committees, you know. Yeah. And I saw him after that. He said, Piers, look, you must stay in there. You've got to carry on the fight. Please carry on the fight. And, you know, he's older than me now, but he's still, you know, dedicated. He hasn't given up. But Sir David Attenborough, Britain, BBC's, you know, poster boy or old man or whatever. I think he's older than me.
Yeah, I think so, yes. I think he is.
He, I would suggest, because I've spoken to him too, he said he would read my stuff, but did he or not? I don't know, but he certainly didn't do anything about it.
Sure.
Now, he's an intelligent man. He must know the CO2 story is nonsense.
Sure.
Maybe,
but again, maybe he cannot speak, you know, he cannot speak.
No, well, if he did, he'd lose his job. That's all I can say. Yes. The BBC is a state broadcaster. Like, look, there's a simple graph here, for example. Just this one, and I show this one quite often. Is it easy to show these things here?
Yeah, go back a bit. Go back with the graph a bit. Excellent. No, the way you were before. Take it to your right a bit. Back.
Is that about right?
Yeah, but you can lean back and speak normally. Lean back.
Lean back and speak normally. Okay.
Take it back a bit.
Take it back a bit. Okay. Right. The green line curve is CO2, and it's just rising slowly. These are official figures. The oscillating curve is American temperatures, the whole of America, and the world data set shows similar, but it's a bit more noise in the world data set. And you see there's a 60-year cycle in temperature peaks.
Can you take it up a bit? Just up
a bit.
That's it.
Yeah, there's a 60-year cycle in temperature peaks. and there's no such cycle in carbon dioxide.
Sorry,
the idea,
Piers, hang on. Start again. The green line is?
the green line is carbon dioxide,
All right.
and the red one
Yes.
is the temperatures.
Right.
And the black dotted line around the red ones is just to join up the temperatures in a semi-smoothed way to show 60-year peaks.
Right.
So there's a 60-year cycle in this, and we understand this. We can explain this cycle as a magnetic and lunar interaction effect. But you see, the idea that CO2 is controlling anything is not even borne out in this. In one section, you can see they're moving together. In another section, they're moving oppositely, and so.
Yes.
So, getting alarmed about CO2 on timescales of this, of more than 60 years or whatever, is a complete nonsense. It means nothing at all, because the natural processes are ruling. Even if this is man CO2 causing this rise, which we dispute anyway, but even if it is, it's obvious that it's not having any effect. It just is a coincidence where they're moving together at one place and not in another. And the Intergovernmental on Climate Change do not show this graph. I was really alarmed when I picked up the 2004 IPCC document. I was sort of thinking, "No, is there going to be something in there which they can decisively show what they believe?" Because I was still struggling with stuff, and I went through the whole thing. There was nothing there. They only had graphs of CO2 levels. They didn't have a graph of temperature at the same time, because they decided in the previous report that CO2 is bad. So this report was just to show how bad is CO2.
Yes.
Yeah, i.e. is more of it, so it's bad. Well, CO2 is the gas of life. The more CO2 we have, the better, actually.
What about ice formation in the caps, of Earth?
Well, it was melting. We have had two warm periods. You see, this 60-year cycle will also be a 60-year cycle in warm periods or in rate of rise of temperature. Here's another graph like this. These yellow arrows show
up. Take
up,
it up. Yes, that's it. That's
back.
it. Yes, that's it. Excellent.
The yellow arrows show rapid rises in temperature around the world, and usually the warmest just show the right hand one there going up rapidly, and they don't show the rest. But I've always pointed out, well, look, actually go back 60 years and then 120 years and you find the same thing happened. So there's nothing special about this. But the current warming, there was warming, probably peaked around 2000, 2005, something like that, or perhaps earlier. That was really 60 years after the 1930s, 40s super warming. The American Dust Bowl, 1935, 34, the number of days that reached 100 degrees F in America was huge, and it's never been reached the same again. So though there's modification of temperature data to try and sell the story, they can't change, this 100 degrees F data, which is fixed. So we know what they say is untrue about it being warmer. It was actually warmer than 60 or more years ago.
So would you say we are
ice caps similar? Ice caps were melting a bit, and now they are increasing. There's very rapid increases now in the Antarctic, and substantial increases in the Arctic. All the glaciers in Greenland, most of them were shortening, and now most of them are getting longer. And the biggest ones, the Jacobshavn Glacier, is really getting a lot longer. So, the amount of ice is going up. The extent of snow in the Northern Hemisphere, you can measure the biggest extent every year, the total snow cover in the Northern Hemisphere. This last winter period, which is just it was ended, it was the biggest for about 50 years. So there's something going on.
Also in Israel, we had a very long winter, and a lot of rain. I mean,
That's right.
Really
That's
proper winter we had. After a few years of drafts, it was, well, good one.
And there's massive amounts of snow in Italy, for example, and there's snow in, well, a lot of the Middle East as well, which is new. Now, the warmists somehow say that warm is cold, and they got some absurd explanation about this. Now, it is complete absurd. It's complete, utter nonsense. But you see, for children who don't know anything and want to save the planet,
Yes.
warm is cold, okay, yeah, all right. You see, if warm is cold, why didn't they forecast global cooling? I mean,
Yes.
it's complete.
So let's
It
talk
is
about.
utter anti-scientific poppycock. It's fraud and evil, and they have to be stopped.
It's good to hear it from you and not from me, because I'm considered I'm considered the bearer of bad news. But I'm like, hey guys, this is reality. I'm not inventing anything. I'm relying on professionals.
I mean, yeah. Now, this is a graph here. I don't know if you can't see that one too well just behind me.
I can see it. The solar activity.
Yeah, and here's a smaller version of it.
All right.
Which
But I can see the big one as well. You can point out the big one, yeah.
Now, that's quite a famous paper published in Nature. I'm sorry it's got ripped because I pass it daily. And it was published in 2001.
All right.
And it's proxy measurements of temperatures and solar activity.
Yeah.
The carbon-14 is the proxy measurement of solar activity, and the oxygen-18 isotope is of temperatures.
You can
and
they're related. I mean,
No, look, I show this to kids, the intelligent ones who can understand, and they then get upset, I say, look, it ain't the sun, it isn't CO2 that's doing it, it's the sun that does it, and it's been doing it for thousands of millions of years,
Yes.
and they get upset. I mean, they should be welcoming the fact that I'm telling them the world isn't going to end because of their dad driving a car. But they don't, they get upset. I mean, I wonder, is there some, well, this is normally called brainwashing.
Brainwash, yeah. I just wanted to say brainwashing, yes.
We've had youth movements, the ecology, not the ecology movement, the
Nazi movement.
the eugenics movement, which preceded the party,
Yes.
was about, it was fake science used to build a movement.
Yes.
And it even had young girls with pigtails in it, praising Hitler. Well, okay, no, look, Greta Thunberg isn't doing anything like that, but she's a poster girl that's used in a way to get other children on their side. And I've got a son who's now 17, but when he was 7, he came back from school one day and said, "Dad, I'm on EcoMates and I'm in charge of EcoMates." And I, "What's EcoMates?" And he said, "Oh, they were collecting litter." I said, "What for?" He said, "It was to save the planet." And I said, "Well, actually, you can do it, but it ain't saving the planet. It's saving a bit of money, I hope, by recycling." But it's sold to these kids, which is, I mean, most children want to do something useful, you know what I mean, which is nice,
sure.
They're misled.
But that's how they're using their fresh minds and their goodwill to take them and do something, which then by that they brainwashing them. And most people don't know that the actual fraud or fake science of eugenics, which you just mentioned, is still going on today. I mean, this was driving all these other scientific fields. And
Yes. I know.
I know. I wanted to ask, are we ahead of a mini ice age?
We are, yes.
What's the time
See,
frame?
I was at a big meeting in New York in 2008, and we predicted that, we were expecting a mini ice age, and I'm going to show you the graph which justifies this. And yes, it's here, this one. Now, a guy called Timo Nurmi, he's dead now, unfortunately, a Finn, he plotted this graph before he died. And what he'd done, because we know that the main signal in solar activity is 22 years, and that is also the main periodicity of world temperatures. 22 years is the double sunspot cycle due to the magnetic reversal of the sun every 11 years. So if you smooth data out over 22 years, then you find that the geomagnetic activity, or the solar activity in this case, reasonably matches the temperatures. And I've got as a smooth graph here, and we've got some other graphs which I'll come to. But in fact, I'll show you that first of all. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah. Here's a graph of, and I showed this at the Russian Academy of Sciences in 2004. This is 11-year averages of geomagnetic activity and temperatures. And you see, they kind of move together, but there's flip-flop.
Up.
Up.
Yes, now you can speak. Yes, now I can see it.
There's flip-flopping above, below, between them
Yeah.
in the 11 years. But there is a kind of general following.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, if you then smooth over 22 years over the double sunspot cycle, you get a remarkable correlation.
Wow.
I mean, that is stunning. Now, I showed that in the Russian Academy of Sciences in 2004.
But hang on. Sorry, Piers. I'm so shocked from
the flipped around on that one, by the way.
So this is global temperature and
geomagnetic activity.
Right. All right.
Which is wobbles in the Earth's magnetic field caused by impacts from the solar wind.
Sure.
Which is the million-mile-an-hour rush of particles from the sun. The more intense the solar wind, the more geomagnetic activity you get.
All right. Go on. You were saying about this Russian guy?
Yes. This is in the Russian Academy of Sciences. And the British Met Office had been invited to this meeting. In fact, originally it was a meeting where the British Met Office had invited themselves to Moscow to convince the Russians to sign the Kyoto Protocol. So me and 5 others, Richard Lindzen from the US of A, for example, who you may have heard of, a very, very able meteorologist of world renown, he was there too, and 3 others from around the world, New Zealand and so forth. Anyway, we made our point, and I remember holding up this graph, and Sir John Houghton from the British Met Office was there. And I said, Sir John, wouldn't this be nice if one of these was CO2 and the other other's temperatures? And he was lost for words. He normally has a lot to say, but he had nothing to say. And at the meeting...
Hang on, I'm still laughing. It's a good one. Go on, sorry.
It's great being there. And at the meeting, Andrei Leonov, who was chairing it, he was Putin's chief scientific advisor. He said, look, the CO2 story's over. It's complete nonsense. It's bullshit. And he probably said things like even ruder in Russian. And not be supported by the Russian Academy of Sciences. But then there was another meeting and they confirmed they didn't support it and so forth.
Right.
Now, since then, of course, the Russians have gone along with the Kyoto Protocol for various reasons which we could go into. But of course, since they're energy producer, they want energy prices to go up. And there's other deals going on. Which
they want a piece of the cake. I mean, like every country. Yes.
Of course.
So
they do indeed.
So
yes,
mini ice age.
Mini ice age. Sorry. Yes,
it's all right. It's cool.
Mini ice age. We said in 2008 at a big meeting in New York, which I think was funded by the Heartland Institute. I mean, I go to meetings. I do look at who they're funded, but I go to meetings by the left or the right, and I've got the view that science has to be discussed by all groupings. You know.
Sure.
Anyway, there, I said quite overtly, there's a mini ice age coming, and held up then this graph from Timo Nuruma, which is a longer graph of the one I just showed. Here is a more smoothed out thing.
Take it back.
Roughly, is that about right? Up,
yes,
down?
Yes. No, that's good. That's good.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see the years. Yes.
Yes, that's right. So there's 2 plots who are 221 years apart, i.e. 10 hail cycles apart. So the lower one starts in 1600, and the top one is 19. I have to look at that. 1600, 1821. Yes, okay. And then they project forward, and they move reasonably well together. And then you see at the end, towards the right, you have a dramatic dip, which corresponds to the Dalton minimum in the lower graph of the little mini ice age, where we had the Napoleonic Wars around then, and lots of frost fairs and very cold Dickens winters anyway in England.
That's the 1800, right?
That's right, 1800.
All
so
right.
That's earlier.
Yes.
And the same thing is going to happen again. It must do. I mean, so we're saying the depth of that, the deepest part is 2030, 2035, so that's something like that. But it's going to get underway pretty well, certainly by 2025. So we haven't got long to wait.
Wow.
You
Fascinating.
know, there will be increasing crop failures in the Northern Hemisphere. This stuff is basically, main effect is in temperate zones. Now, last time it happened, there was big crop failures in Germany, and a lot of Germans moved to Spain. That's what happened then. Now, right now, we have, there are crop failures in Europe, and the biggest recording ones are now clearly in America. The growing season for wheat in the northern USA is less. It's just, not so good. And in the southern USA, the maize growing is now, there's hundreds of thousands of acres now are just useless. They don't have enough growing season for maize, so these crops are going to be scrapped. Wow. So, it's already a food crisis coming upon us, but the world is pointing us in the wrong direction.
Sure.
Completely the wrong direction. We should be preparing now for what to do in these. It's going to mean we should be growing turnips instead of wheat. We should be having more and more polytunnels, which are those, little plastic greenhouses, if you like, all over the place. Yes. And I have people who buy our forecast in Scotland have polytunnels. They want to know about the sunshine that's coming into the tunnel, so it's useful to have our forecast anyway for that. But, sure. They are cheating the winter. If you want to control weather, that's what to do. If it's a polytunnel, you can make weather more acceptable that way.
Yes.
And that is going to be the way. And after this mini ice age, there's an open question: will it recover? And I will say it'll never recover or not in 130,000 years will it recover to the levels that happened in the 1930s.
Wow.
There's some Russian groups saying, we're going to lead into the next full ice age straight away. Now, I don't know. It takes 1,000 years or so to get into a full ice age anyway. So, but if we do have a full ice age within 1,000 years, which I think is very likely, but it doesn't mean that it's going to really start in like 2040 or anything. Yes. But the Russians will come. They will come. The Russians will come. They will come to come south. They can't carry on living in Russia.
Sure.
And Scotland as well. The Scots will come help. So there will be an ice cap over Russia, starting off in North Russia, most of Scandinavia, the Arctic Ocean will be frosted all year, and it will extend slowly.
Wow.
This is what will happen, unless we can find a way of extending our lives, that we won't be there to see that. But
so here is one question. Here is one question. I think it's interesting question. Is it possible that the geoengineering that is happening and all this fake agenda with geoengineering actually happens because those who are in control, they know that there's a mini ice age coming, and they put all this...
I think they know. Well, they watch my videos and they know. We have a success rate which work, 85% success rate against for time divisions of just 4 days, months ahead.
Wow,
right?
Wow. That's pretty accurate.
Here says it's going to rain. It might be early in that period, it might be late, might be more rain, might be less, but it will rain.
Yes.
Right? And they know that, right? The CO2 story has got no success, completely zero success. They promised us runaway warming. We haven't had it. They promised us the end of snow. The end of snow. We've had more snow. They promised us more hurricanes. We've had less hurricanes. We've had some very intense hurricanes,
yes,
which we predicted and explained, but the number of hurricanes has gone down.
So is it possible that all this fake agenda, as well as geoengineering, is actually out there to prepare or not to make us too afraid from a mini ice age, which may be more severe than the fear-based agenda that they're putting out now? Maybe it's because they want to. I'm just thinking out loud, you know.
Yeah. No.
Maybe
Why
just a flip idea, just to not telling us what is really coming, you know, because then there will be mass, I don't know, demonstrations, and there will be a mess all over, you know. People will gather food, and people will
will be food shortages the way they're going. You know, there will be food shortages. Yeah, there will be. How does this help them? I don't know. It makes people look in the wrong direction, that's for sure. Distracts attention, but you see, it is going to happen for real at some point. Now, they could be trying geoengineering to limit limit warming now,
yes,
or actually make it cooler now, is in preparation, and then turn off this cooling methods by spraying. I don't know, but you see, frankly, the capacity needed to make real cooling is vast. I mean, when you see this geoengineering chemtrails, it's a relatively small area, and I suspect the army are there monitoring stuff and, you know, obviously not reporting it to anybody, but they're trying it out and seeing if they can succeed. Now, what next, I don't know, but, well, a weapon in hand is worth two weapons in the bush, as they say, or something.
So what do you reckon will happen? I mean, talking about, you know, governments, the New World Order, the UN, the Agenda 2130, what do you reckon will happen? I mean, you're quite well, I mean, learned person, but non-conformist. I mean, you have no problem, like a salmon fish, you have no problem to swim against the stream. That's your attitude.
Well,
and that's
my friends in Glastonbury point out that I'm a Pisces, which probably helps in this. So I'm assuming.
So what you reckon will happen, Piers? I mean, give us a prediction.
Well, I think it's going to be hard, but I think we will make headway, and this is already happening, and it'll be especially around 5G, and a lot of people will realise that 5G is bad, and then they'll be ready to look beneath as to who wants 5G, right, and why and how has Extinction Rebellion come about. And then the different Labour parties around the world will suddenly realise that actually they've been taken for a ride, and they've been adopting policies which are actually racist, though they didn't realise it. For example, and I mentioned this in my speech in Speaker's Corner, that the main victims of the climate change agenda are black African women, because the International Monetary Fund, the United Nations, have held back the electrification of Africa, because they say, oh, you've got to have wind farms, you've got to have this or that. Well, that means that it's African women stooping over those smoky stoves and open fires 24/7, right? And they die young through ingesting this stuff.
Yes.
So the UN policy on climate is a racist policy. Do you understand? It's a racist policy. And, you know, they don't want to say that because, you know, it's not politically correct to be racist. Obviously, it's a bad thing. But, you know, quite seriously, they should be supporting a mass program of electrification of Africa through the cheapest way possible, which is coal-fired power stations. Now, if the West don't do it, China will. And already China is building 2 state-of-the-art, fantastic, really high-temperature, most efficient coal-fired power stations in South Africa, where, you know, the cleanliness of what comes out is the best ever. You know, they're removing all the smoke, well, as much as you can. And that will happen. But, you know, the West is completely short-termed. And, well, a lot of politicians believe the narrative. Most politicians are ignorant. And they'll respond to what the BBC tells them to think, because they think their voters are going to think this. And the actual popularity and interest in climate change as a action for politicians has gone down a lot. See, the Australian Labor Party went into that election just a few weeks ago saying this is the global warming election. You've got to vote for us to save the planet. And they were going to close down and prevent a expansion of one very big mine in Queensland. They lost. They expected to lose seats. They lost. So now that expansion will go ahead. And where will the coal go? Well, most of it will be exported to China, of course.
Yes.
You know, or maybe it'll go to South Africa to help. I don't know. Actually, they've got their own coal in South Africa, so they don't need that. But you know, they might even open some coal-fired power stations in Australia. I think they'll have to. But that Labour Party is not going to come back to power for a long time. It told lies to the people, and they've been seen through. Now that will spread. That will spread. You know, and I think that 5G is the main thing. Plus, well, the price of electricity going up is just an abomination to pay for these wind farms, these bird killing machines, because they are killing birds, they are killing bats, and they're also killing insects. Last year, 1,200 tons of insects were killed in Germany by wind farms.
Wow.
Now, a lot, 1,200 tons. A lot of these, well, you have to get a picture of how many insects there are. I don't know, but it's a lot of insects.
It is
and a lot of pollinating insects. So, that, you know, there's 1,200 tons of, half of them might be pollinated insects who have not been pollinating at the time, when it's actually a shorter growing season. So, you know, this is when we want more bees, not less.
Sure. You know, I saw a picture the other day, just a couple of days ago. In China, they are pollinating trees by hand because of shortage of pollinating, you know, bees and insects. Yes, and you see Chinese people going on the trees and doing it by fingers and by hands, and it's like, wow, this is where we're going. You know, this is talking about the future.
They're awesome, but oh God,
you
can't you get a hive of bees and put them under a tree? But I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, Another quick question: if the CO2 is going up, does it mean that plantations or green plants also increasing?
It does mean that, and there is evidence of that, which has been independently reported, not by us, but there's a lot of measurements show that, which is probably one of these United Nations bodies which doesn't talk to the other bodies and haven't been told not to say this yet, or they're going to say it anyway. I mean, of course, people who work in the United Nations, a lot of them, you know, they're there to do good, and they get.
Sure.
I mean, I met one who was really upset about what's happening on the Amazon. He said, "Look, it's going to produce more methane than the CO2 it's going to reduce, so it's mad, you know." And I told him that the whole story was mad, and then he got upset with me. But you know, there are people in the UN, some of whom, possibly a lot of whom, want to do good. You know.
So I just tell the audience that
they supported this increasing greening of vegetation, and that is a good thing.
So I just tell the audience, I mean, more CO2 is more plants, more greening, and more greening is more oxygen. I mean, just remember that. It means more life. CO2 means more life, not less.
CO2 is the gas of life.
Yes.
And oxygen is the fire.
You know, in Israel, most people, I will use this opportunity again just to say, some people think, I mean, I'm talking about world views. Some people think that Israel is not deploying 5G, and I'm here to say it is. Israel is deploying 5G. There's all sorts of rumors everywhere, also in the mainstream media, that it's being postponed, etc., etc. But I remind you, don't believe the mainstream media. They are here to what?
Yeah, no, I think that's very interesting. There's also a reported that Belgium or Brussels, the city of Brussels.
It's wrong. It's not true.
That's not true either.
I tell you
They
something.
haven't.
I tell you something. You need to be in touch with Mark Steele. He's from Gateshead, in the north,
I know him.
north of UK, and he's been reporting some of what I said about Israel, because also they are chopping down trees in Israel. I mean, as preparations for the 5G masts. But he's also been talking about Brussels, saying that it's also false. I mean, it's been published that Brussels is not deploying 5G, but actually they do. So there's a lot of, we need to remember that who controls the media is actually the big corporations. And the big corporations, they have a big, at least couple of hands in the 5G agenda and business. So there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation around. Obviously, you know it on the side of the climate change and global warming. It's same goes for 5G. I mean, just the less we know, the better for them. So I'm just reminding people and the audience that at the end of the day, it's we the people. It's about us. It's not about government. It's not about corporation. Absolutely. It's about us. It's about us and our families and our daily life and our house and food and animals and plants. And this is life, not, not this camera and not this computer and not this screen. This is not life. Biology is life. The rest is just man-made inventions, and we need to put things straight, just to remind ourselves that this is what important, really. We can all see the degrading in many areas of our lives, especially with kids when they are introduced to all this technology. Knowing that, and all the brainwashing is being done in the education system. Knowing that, and all the 5G that is being introduced, so there's going to be more radiation and more degrading of abilities of children. And I think parents, and everything I do is to make people wake up, and for parents to look after the kids, because there's a lot of ignorance around, unfortunately, as you know. And it's up to us just to remind people the difference between true and false. And I really appreciate you, man. Pierce, you excellent. Just, I really enjoyed this talk. There's so much to learn from you, and you just in a very simple way, you put the truth out. And this is what I really liked when you went up the ladder. And I'm like, that's a boy, that's my man, That's the way to do it.
Yeah, we had about over 30,000 hits on that.
Wow, it's amazing clip, because it's so simple and it grabs the attention, and this is you. I mean, you unique. I mean, with the way you do stuff, not just the way you think and the way you put it out, but actually how you approach people and how you say your scientific facts, your scientific truths, and obviously they work. I mean, your predictions are right. Well, most of the time, not always.
That's the test. It's the only test in science.
Exactly.
Opinion is not a test.
Exactly.
You see, Galileo had this problem. Imagine he'd found out, stuff about the motion of the planets, and the Earth. What a finding! And he goes along to the Pope, who was in charge of science, because science with the same thing, and was told this is wrong. So opinion has to trump, overrule actual evidence. Well, this is not science, and of course, this opinion poll of so-called scientists, this fake opinion poll, of course, is again an irrelevancy. It doesn't matter, even if all the scientists in the world think one thing, they could still be wrong. And Galileo was in the minority of one at the time.
I'm trying to. Well, I've been thinking about asking you that, and I'm like, well, no, it's not about this, and I'm tempted. Just because you a scientist and you're very honest and you stick to the truth, which I love it in everyone, not just you, also in myself and everyone I meet who sticks to the truth. There is this movement of a flat Earth story.
Okay.
And what you have to tell them?
Well, the Earth is not flat.
Excellent. Thank you for the interview, man.
The Earth is it is a globe. A globe is a reasonably accurate representation of the Earth.
Right. No need to add. I mean, that's fine.
No.
I just wanted.
But there are interesting. There's these little experiments they've done of showing that a light shining along near the surface can go beyond where it's supposed to go. So it must be flat, you see, or something.
Right.
But you see, there is refraction near the surface of the Earth. The density of the air goes down, especially at, you know, when you go up. So there is refraction going on, and people that have measured this sensitively have got that confused. That's their so-called evidence for there being a flat Earth, but it is complete utter poppycock. You know?
Okay, I just say for myself, since I came to know this flat Earth idea, I looked it up, and I realized I don't have the tools to decide. I don't feel like I'm.
Sure, yeah. Most of what people believe is what they've seen on TV.
Yes,
but
I prefer to stay open. I prefer to stay open to everything, because I know I've been lied to all my life by the corporations, by governments, by the media. So I prefer to stay open to any possibility. But you were about to say?
Well, I think these are a fake nonsense campaign. You see, I've been to meetings of the Talking Group, which used to meet in Pimlico and got thrown out of a hall, I think. But anyway, they'd have people along talking about all sorts of things. They had me along talking about man-made climate change is not true. They have people talking about, well, any argument,
yes,
which might be termed conspiracy. It's like, you know, what is the evidence of man going to the moon or not going to the moon, anything like that, you see, which would be called conspiracy theories. Now, some people were turning up at these meetings. I haven't been to many of them, but they were turning up announcing they were flat Earth believers. Now, I'm certain they were sent there just to mix up complete insanity with, you know, genuine things that people like me have to say. So that newspapers come along there. You see, there was a Daily Mail saying, oh, Mr. Corbyn, yes, we understand there's people here who are flat earthers and this and that and so on. Where do you stand on this spectrum of things? Yeah, you know, I said, look, hang on, I'm not here talking about any of those. Yes. I've got something to say on this. But I think they are fake mad idea groups which are sent along to muddy the waters.
Right. All right. I'll take you for that. I mean, it's an opinion, you know. Yeah. For me, I still don't know. It can be flat, it can be round. It doesn't matter, because we have so many other things to do before we decide if it's flat or round, and they are more important than this. So,
yes,
I prefer to deal with them instead of that, at least. Until we sort out these things, you know, it can wait a bit. Piers Corbyn, it's been a pleasure. It's still a pleasure. I mean, we're still on the interview and on the talk.
Yeah, but a long time. Weatheraction.com.
I'll put the link and I'll put everything. It's all right. Don't worry. I'll put the links and I'll send you a link to the video. Keep up the good work, because what you do is excellent, and it's a rare voice, although there's more who speaks the same things.
There are more now.
But you are unique, and I'm glad I came to know you, and I came to know this video, and you answered the phone, so thank you for that. And
yes.
Thank you for your time and for your expertise. It's been a pleasure.
Okay.
All the best to you. We'll stay in touch. Thank you very much, Piers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.